with all that's going on in the last 2 weeks, what intention that you would like to have for the duration of 2024? Because before we look up, we will be in September, and then the end of the year, holidays will come. So what, in regards to your mental health, will it require? If there's one word that comes up, I want you to put that in the chat, because I want to discuss what creates anxiety in your life or blockages. And then I want to see what other word we can bring on the other side of that, so that there can be peace of mind, freedom from anxiety, and things that allow you to speak your truth, live your truth, be in your truth, walk in your truth. Because I know me, I'm going to be transparent today. All of the videos that went around with the young lady that was taken, her life was taken in her kitchen, really affected me. The way that women came together in that same week to raise as much money as they raised for the new potential president also was a trigger for me, because we can come together so quick for something like that, but then we have all these other things going on that no one wants to donate to. And I won't get into politics, but if you understand the political system, it is the electoral vote that gets the president in, not our vote. It is our local votes that matter. So I do want us to be mindful about that as well. And yes, I do understand how this can be very saddening. You know, it could be very, very, very overwhelming. That's the word that's coming to mind. All of these things could be very, very overwhelming. So when we look at a lot of different things, we do have to walk by faith and not by sight, you know, praying and meditating to even be able to hear, because again, we could pray, we could talk, we have all these things that are going on around us, and yet we are not able to really hear that stillness in our minds, because we have so much going on. So that being stressless, being still, being mindful, mindfulness is can be difficult for some. Staying present is the key, and taking care of ourselves, because we have to know our triggers. So when we look at those things, in what way does that and can that apply to just our everyday? Every day is a prayer. Every word that comes out of our mouth is a prayer. So I love what has been placed in the chat. If you're still thinking about it, feel free to still add to the discussion in the best way that you can, because again, with these words, stressless, stress is a factor. Being distracted is a factor. Seeing the things that we see can affect us. That's why for me, that video that just was constantly surfacing, it's like, that was a lot. So let's look at these statistics, and then I want to have a discussion about how your 7 months have been, and what would you like to work on that I may be able to assist with. Again, I'm not a therapist, but I am a life coach. I am a priestess of African spirituality, for those that are just joining us and do not know who I am. But I have a lot that I've done over the course of my life, not lifespan, but in the last 10 years. And so I will definitely share some mindful, meditative approach to these issues, because again, we need something to counteract what we are seeing again. Being more intentional and positive is a good thing, a good way, doing something good for others, being kind. It's the small things, and I'll share a story of something that kind of displays how much we are in a rush these days. And so I appreciate those that are continuing to add, but let's get into the statistics, and then we'll go back to the mindful ways to really kind of deal with these things. So Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, 36.1% of the Asian adults have mental illness that receive treatment. Again, these are people that receive treatment. Language is a barrier sometimes, because 31% or 30.9% of Asian Americans are not fluent in English. So there's barriers, and cultural appropriate mental health service providers, may be slim in comparison to those that speak English. When we look at the African American community, it is 37.9% that receive mental illness retreatment. And despite we're having the conversation, there's many conversations that are going on. And some may encounter negative experiences when seeking treatment because, again, the provider might be biased or conscious or unconscious of the cultural differences that they may have. You know, if a person is not of African American ancestry or African ancestry, they're unable to possibly relate in a capacity. And that may be a reason why many Africans in America or Black African Americans do not receive treatment. And some of them are being misdiagnosed as schizophrenia when they express their symptoms regarding mood disorders. And some of those things could be of the suppression. We had the crack era. We had, the Black Panthers when they were doing good in the community and then they were taken down. So all of those things stemming back to slavery and the stories that we've been told since elementary, it kind of created a different mental health condition for Black or African Americans or Africans ancestry communities. And then when we look at the Hispanic community, nearly half of them young adults between 18 to 25 have serious mental illness, but they do not receive treatment. Approximately 39.6% of Hispanic Latino adults have received treatment in compared to the US average of 50.6%. Some of this have to deal with the immigration and not having documentation. And then some of it also talks about the insurance coverage that they may not have in order to get this help. Again, this information is on NAMI, NAMI.org. So if you want to read a little bit more about their program, what they offer, Bibi Moore Campbell is a very profound advocate. Her daughter, if you remember the movie, the television show In the House with Debbie Allen and LL Cool J. She was the young lady that was in the house, and she is the one that started this because of her daughter's experience in the public. So she became an advocate and a mental health trailblazer and used her power to share. There's also a website called betterhelp.com. BetterHelp.com is one that can give you and align you with a counselor or a therapist according to the questions that you ask, and it is based off of your income and what you can afford to pay. It can be as low as $10 a month, so you also want to check out BetterHelp.com. Okay, so I want to get to some of these things that was brought up. It's a lot in regards to a question was asked, how do we bring mindful meditative approach to these issues? That is a very, very loaded question in a sense, because oftentimes we're unable to see the reason behind the things that are there. And just to confirm, that is BetterHelp, H-E-L-P, BetterHelp, H-E-L-P.com. Thank you for that clarification. But a lot of it is, and I don't want to say turn your eye and turn your back to what the reality is. The prayer is one step. Having these conversations is another step of how to be mindful. Getting to know your neighbors, to me, is of importance, because in situations like that, if that person, speaking of the young lady, in that, they may have known that she had mental health. It may have been other things. It may have been neighbors that were watching out. But sometimes we have some communities that are still operating in the old way of thinking, old way of being, old things. And so a lot of it, some people will say, well, why would God allow that? God expresses itself in the many. So we have to see light and dark. But the collective as a whole, we are operating in the dark out of fear, doubts, insecurities, low vibrational things. It's not to say that the reality of what is happening is not present. It is, how do we continue to educate one another? How do we continue to hold space for one another? How do we continue to even breathe through those moments? How often are you even watching this stuff? How much attention do you give to it? Because we understand that it's life and it is going to happen, but it is the awareness and the community coming together and operating out of love. when I have journeyed through different cultures, different countries, different religions, different communities within my own community, one thing that I can say is when I go in communities that are unified, they take care of their community. They say hi to the neighbors. They speak to the neighbors. They have an understanding of what their area is. Unfortunately, one thing that I did see is recently I read an article about there was a redlining of certain communities in the early 1900s. In these redlined communities, mostly considered to be the hood, they took out a lot of trees. They took out a lot of fruit trees, especially I'm familiar with the LA area. They took a lot of nature out. And nature is what is our medicine, whether we realize it or not. When they did that, they took away some of the oxygen that comes into the neighborhood. The food is different in our neighborhood. The grocery stores are different in those same neighborhoods. But in some of these neighborhoods, there are people that are building community gardens. In some of these neighborhoods, there are people that are coming together and they're planting trees. In some of these neighborhoods, they're still watching children. I'm a 70s baby, my neighbors would tell on me because everybody in the community knew each other. But as time has grown, things happen to where life is a rat race and we forget the simplicity of having relationships with our neighbors or people in our community. So for me, I'm mindful about my community. I'm mindful about my neighbors. I'm mindful about um, the cars that come around, a lot of different things. I walk my neighborhood during the daylight to see what it is that is going on in my community. I am in a highly dense area, and during event times, I notice how my community shifts. So for me, in my community, we have really kind of watched out for each other. You know, if somebody's out of town or somebody's not home, I have a few neighbors that I may go and do something, they can text me. That is one thing that I would say would be beneficial of how to be mindful in your community. The other thing is, again, how much do you give your attention to this stuff? How much does it take, you know, the capacity of your brain, your energy, your time? Um, I would like to hear about how some of you are even dealing with it. You know, how are you dealing with the things that you're seeing? How do you feel about it? Are you hopeful? Are you optimistic? Are you a believer? Because there's a difference between hoping, wishing, and praying versus believing, coming to a knowing, and a seeing and experiencing. Okay, I'll repeat that again. Hoping is like wishing and praying for something to happen, but there's no action. If you believe, you come to a knowing, and then you're responsible for what you know. So, for example, we all know what's going on. We know the history is repeating itself, but in what ways have we gone out and used our voice? In what ways have we had these conversations when someone is grieving the loss of a loved one, or someone is dealing with dis-ease, or a mother is dealing with lots of children and they don't have the assistance? Because oftentimes trust becomes an issue. We don't trust one another. And so, how can we be mindful? In what ways do we not trust ourselves? Because we have to look within in the first place to see how the external experience is. Because two people could be in the same room but having different experiences, completely different experiences. So, in being mindful of your energy in these spaces, how are you contributing? How are you moving out of love? How are you moving out of authenticity? That's a big word right now. How are you being authentic to yourself? How are you being authentic to the children, the grandchildren? When are you finding time for yourself? Because sometimes we're in a rush for nothing. One of my sisters gave an example yesterday and said that they were in the grocery store and they had two items but need to go get more items. And there was a person that was waiting behind the person that was with her when she went to go get the other items. This person let the lady with the basket full of groceries go before him to self check out. In that, the other person who came back was not happy. I've been there before, I've done that before, but what was I in a rush for? What would I be in a rush for if I had nowhere to get? Your day is free. Why is there a rush? Sometimes we have to slow down in the process and allow ourselves to feel. And most of us don't want to feel because we've had so much trauma, we've had so much drama, we've had so many things that don't allow us the space to feel vulnerable enough to even address that said feeling. And instead, sometimes it's an energy that's put in motion, and we either break down, we either go into a shell, we either, some people may act out and do things that are not out of love, and commit certain acts and things of that nature. And so when I think of minority mental health, I also think of the minority of women, being that most of us on this line are women. So, in what ways can you take care of your mental health in a space when you are the nurturer, when you are the head of the household, when you are all the things, all the things, and still have to go to work, take care? When do you have time to care for yourself? Grandparents, retired people, when do you have time to take care of yourself? What is your mental health practice? What do you do to maintain your mental health? You know, you can put it in the chat. I do see someone put that they would like to get organized, clarity, energy, improve sleep habits. One of the things that I would say is journaling is a good way to get that mental clarity out, putting it on paper. If you're an overthinker, that is one way that you can do that. Meditation, most people think that they have to be quiet in order to meditate. That is not the way that I operate. I want you to think. I want you to really know what it is that, what's coming up when you're going through this process or whatever space that you're in, because then that can tell you what you can work on and what you can let go of. Because some things we can't change. Some things we can't, we're stressing over it, or it's constantly taking up space in our mind, but we can't change it. It's either already happened or it's something out of our control. So it is that stillness that will give you a little bit more clarity. A lot of people also may take a walk in nature. That is also a way to ground yourself, also a way to nurture yourself, because the smell of the environment, depending on where you are, it can really bring a balance to your body. You know, smelling the roses is just not a phrase, it's an actual thing. If you smell a flower, it will change the chemicals in your brain. Seeing trees, seeing birds, or being aware of those things can also bring you to a now moment, being mindful of your now. Now, a lot of times, some people, and I think someone actually added to this, is, um, you know, holding space. How many of you have an accountability partner? Do you have someone that you can actually sit with and be vulnerable with? That is also something that you want to allow yourself to have, because, again, trust is a big thing in our community. We distrust a lot of people, but it has to get to a place of trusting yourself in order to trust someone else. And you'll know how your body feels, just like a child, when they're around certain people, they don't gravitate to them because it may be an energy that they have. And so, again, that is also a way to help with your mental health, because some people don't want to go to a therapist. Some people don't feel comfortable because they may not be aligned. But I will say, if you set the intention, for those that may go to betterhelp.com or seek out a therapist, set your intention first and hold that vision. It may be hard to hold that vision, but when you hold that vision, it actually comes into manifestation. If the more you feed yourself that energy, the more it will come to life. I am a firm believer in that. Um, just for example, for those that may be car hunting, you see a particular car that you had never seen before, but then all of a sudden you start seeing that car, or you start seeing that color or that thing. That is how your intention, how powerful your intention and manifestation is. Miss Shirley, I see you unmuted. Is there something you would like to share with us? maybe, oh, she's connecting the audio. Okay. Is there anyone that would like to share, though, when we're talking about this? I do see in the comments, Miss Grace, she's limited to what she watches. She saw a news clip about the shooting of the lady once, but it was disturbing. So it's just checking every few days and picking and choosing. That is very good. Watching short news clips versus the entire hour. That is protecting your mental health, because it is too much. News these days is not, to me, positive. But you go in different communities, different cultures and countries, I have seen what news really is. Gardening and being out in nature is another way to deal with the mental mindfulness. Going back to church helps Miss Phyllis a lot. Spending time with children, grandchildren. Yes, the children always bring light and joy. And being okay with the simple things. You know, a lot of things is the gratitude for what we have. And then again, being able to truly, truly speak your truth and things to help you out with mindfulness, the Calm app, and they have guided meditations. YouTube is always a good thing. One thing I would also say that can challenge your mind is try to learn a new language. You can go with Duolingo, Duolingo. That is an app that is free where you can learn